Okay, chapter 5. We are still having parallel stories with parallel protagonists in Mark and Jane, although this really was kind of a Mark chapter. We didn't get very much from Jane, but what we got from her was significant. But I think we're going to spend most of our time with Mark. We've got more subsections based off of Mark than we do on Jane. So we are there at Bellberry. I sometimes forget that's the name of the location where Nice is, but that's Bellberry. So remember that Mark had come home, but now he is on the way back. This whole little interaction in the very beginning, where he had been kind of uneasy about the way it had ended so vaguely. Do you really have a job there? And how much are you really making? And being with Jane has reminded him that he really does need to get some concrete information. But on the way back, he is starting to kind of feel his oats again. He's starting to kind of get a little more comfortable with this thought about, he's not a first timer anymore. He is returning, and he is now sort of taking his place in what he hopes is that inner circle that his pride is so interested in him being a part of. He also has this vision that he's just going to show up in Wither's office. He's going to kind of lay down the law about, I need a contract, I need this, I need that. And he was maybe going to be willing to negotiate to say, well, if I don't get this, then I'm out of here. And then he was going to get obviously a very clear answer, because that's the way it played out in his mind. Um, any good negotiator is supposed to be willing to walk away. That's supposed to be, you know, uh, always in your back pocket if you are trying to work something out with another party. And so I think Mark sort of figures he's got this under control. He's going to go in and he's going to lay down the law, and Wither is going to not want to lose him. So once that becomes clear, Wither will then be much more specific, detailed, and frank with Mark about the specifics of this job. He's worried about this being contractual. He's worried about exactly how much money, because the totals are starting to pop up in his head about how much money he's already committed to and already spent. And he really doesn't like these other guys that he's potentially having to work with or even under, most especially Steele. And so he's got it in his head. He is going to get some assurances. He is going to get some specifics. And if not, well, then see ya, I'm out the door. And in Mark's mind, at least, he's got enough leverage where the threat of him leaving will be enough for Wither to be specific. At least this is the scenario that is playing out in Mark's mind. So he gets there. There's Steele and Crosser, and it is awkward. It's uncomfortable. Mark tries to get a little more information out of Steele. Steele is kind of a jerk about it. And all that does is really give Mark more rationale in his own mind. I have got to get a straight answer from the deputy director, and there ain't no way I am going to work underneath Steele. I need some kind of assurance that either I am his boss or I'm working for somebody else. So he's kind of walked in on the deputy director, and with this assumption that he can kind of, let me in, I've got demands. And instead there's somebody else there, and Wither's general his general manner has never changed. It's never altered. Everything is very vague and very dreamy, as though he's always sort of looking past you. everything is still very non-committal and non-threatening. He speaks in these long sentences that you're still not really sure what he said by the time he's done. But there is somebody else there, Mr. Stone, and Mark is immediately uncomfortable, thinking, "Uh-oh, what have I walked in on? I guess I need to pull myself out of this." So as he does extricate himself, but this Mr. Stone guy looks like he might be in trouble. So potentially Mark has already kind of gotten in his head, uh-oh, getting in trouble with Wither is a possibility. If this guy's in trouble, maybe I could be in trouble. So he's got maybe some new thoughts percolating in his mind. But who does he meet when he comes out again? But Hardcastle. And we get another one of those sort of weird images where like we talked about when we first met Hardcastle about the uncanny valley, there seems to be something about her that just seems off. Her very masculine mannerisms and her way of speech and even her way of dress, it just sort of neither fish nor fowl. Yet as masculine as she presents herself to be, the other her office seems to employ a lot of ladies within this little internal police force. The police force out there doing things seem to be all men, but the police force inside doing the paperwork and the office stuff seem to be extremely feminine women, to the point where they're described as being kind of girlish. So again, I think it's intending to make Hardcastle stand out all the more as just being kind of you're just sticking out like a sore thumb. So Mark is trying to talk about, his feelings are kind of hurt in this maybe, or he's just sulking. Children who don't get their way, oftentimes make a big production about letting people know how upset they are, with the hopes, I think, that people will realize, oh, I didn't mean to upset you. Let me fix this. Let me give you what you want. Let me address this. So he seems to be kind of airing his grievances a little freely, maybe. And Hardcastle just is not going to have anything to do with it. She is still, for some reason, kind of taking him under her wing a little bit, but she is still alluding to the fact that he doesn't even know what he's saying yet. He doesn't understand the situation well enough to realize what he's gotten himself into. And even the questions that he's asking are the wrong sort of questions. Why worry about the sociology department and potentially working for Steele? That whole department's that's on the chopping block already. The real power, there's stuff underneath it you haven't even realized yet. So all these things that you're worried about, you're looking on the surface and you don't even get it. She is even offering him a little bit of inside information. Is that for Mark's benefit? Is that for her benefit? I'm going to suggest that very few people at NICE are doing anything for anyone's benefit other than themselves. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't also benefit from it, but I think that's almost an accident. Ultimately, everybody is out for themselves, and I have zero reason to believe that Hardcastle doesn't have her own reasons, rationales, and her own goal in mind that will benefit herself in kind of pulling Mark in. So we get a little bit about the quote unquote real work that Mark is going to be asked to do. And she's giving him a little bit of a heads up in the sense of, you could actually start working on this right away. And so when you're asked to do it, you would either have something to show for already, like, oh, by the way, this is my initiative that I've shown, or you have enough of a heads up so that when you are asked to do it, you'll be able to do it quicker and more efficiently because you're going to understand what you're being asked to do. So what is he being asked to do? He is being asked to rehabilitate the public image of Alcazan. Now, this is a guy that we don't really know, and we've only been referred to very indirectly. The first time we met Alcazan was actually in one of Jane's dreams. He was the sort of crazy looking guy who was being executed. She had a vision of him having his head unscrewed like the top of a jar. And then she saw in the paper that same face. He was considered like a scientific madman. And that because of his immoral experiments, was jailed and eventually executed. And this was on the continent. I don't know if it's maybe France or someplace like that. It wasn't super local, but it was certainly European. But Hardcastle says your first real work isn't this little town thing that Crosser had you talking about last week. Nobody cares about these little towns anyway. The real work is going to start with this guy Alcazan. We're going to rehabilitate him. So the newspaper articles might have been a little on the sensational side, but they were also probably reasonably factual, that he had done some probably cruel experiments or creepy experiments, illegal experiments, immoral experiments, and he was paying the price for that. We could maybe view him as, at least I have in my head, kind of a weird cross between a Nazi scientist and Rasputin, like the mad monk, but who was also doing, for the sake of what's called scientific progress, some really awful things. This is not easy reading to put you to bed at night, but there were not too secret wings of both Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, which specialized in human experimentation for the sake of what they called scientific progress. And some of the accounts are kind of bone-chillingly horrific. Many people have heard, even if they don't know what he did, about the Nazi scientist Joseph Mengele, who was oftentimes using concentration camp victims for physical experimentation, human vivisection, cutting open live people to see what makes them tick. The Imperial Japan also had a secret scientific arm that was doing very, very similar things, taking prisoners of war, trying to freeze them, trying to burn them, freezing then burning them, cutting off parts of their body, and making copious notes on what they observed, with the sense of the justification of, this was scientific knowledge. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. What temperature does the body stop functioning? How many times can you cut off an arm and sew it back on before it won't stay on anymore? I mean, really some awful, crazy things. But when all morality and human decency have been removed as the boundaries for scientific curiosity, well, that can lead into all sorts of terrible places. And so that's kind of where we're gonna assume that Alcazan was inhabiting. A potentially brilliant mind, but a deeply twisted, disturbed, if not diabolical mind, using his powers of intellect for suffering and pain and destruction, which is a terrible use of any God-given gift. The idea is, what can we do to rehabilitate this guy's image. Now, why they want to do that never comes up. Why in the world would you want to take the ravings of a mad scientist and make him more palatable to the general public? We get no sense of that yet. But Hardcastle basically lays out this multi-step plan. She gives him the vague sort of broad strokes with the assumption that Mark will come up with the clever ways to really make it happen. You know, the first thing you need to do, and the second thing you need to do, and then the third thing you need to do. And by the end of it, everyone is going to see him not as a monster getting his just desserts, but as a martyr. Here was if not a good guy, someone who certainly didn't deserve to be punished. They need to highlight the good that he did, the knowledge that was gained, the unfairness of a system that sought out to punish free thinkers or people with creative ideas. You know, how can we repackage and repurpose this story so that people don't see Alcazan as anything other than something positive and good? And that seems to be a pretty tall order. I mean, somebody executed for crimes against humanity, how you're going to rehabilitate their image in the press, that's a big trick. But that's precisely why they wanted somebody young and smart and clever and talented like Mark. That seems to be appealing to his vanity. But also there seems to be some truth to it. We liked your writing. We see something in you that, you know, maybe you can spin a good yarn, or maybe you just have a compelling way about you, or maybe you've just got kind of your finger on the pulse, whatever it might be, but this can be useful to Nice. The creepy thing is, Nice seems to think it's useful to have the public embrace a mad scientist. Again, why that is, we don't know yet. But this is a part of the great work that she is alluding to, and really only a first step. But this is the first real work that she says Mark is going to be offered to give him that first step into what Nice is going to be all about. Bless you. We still don't know yet, but that's kind of a hint. And she gives a little indication about Nice's political leanings, which are neither left nor right, but very eager to keep the right arguing with the left and the left arguing with the right. That does not seem to be an idea that only occurred in the 1950s in England. That seems to be an idea that seems familiar even today. You can keep people feeling like they're on opposite sides, on opposing teams, keep them arguing with each other, then that gives people behind the scenes all sorts of room and cover to do what they really want to do. And so this, she gives almost a whole page in basically explaining not just how Nice does this, but how this can be done in a variety of circumstances. If you have a left-leaning paper, word things in a certain way. If you have a right-leaning paper, word things in a certain way. Get both sides to point at the other to say it's their fault, and we have to do something about it. And while they're arguing with each other, they'll be distracted, they'll be focused and consumed, and we'll just walk around the side and do what we were planning on doing all along. Because left and right and the whole political structure, that's all pretty much meaningless to them. Again, what they're actually trying to do, what their genuine and deep and secret goals are, we don't really know. But we're starting to see that they're the kind of agency that feels like it needs the cover of darkness to do what it really wants to do. And it's going to generate that cover of darkness by getting people riled up about something kind of inconsequential and get them fighting amongst themselves. Because if you're fighting with somebody else, you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. If you can be convinced that whatever argument you currently have with somebody is of utmost importance, that's going to take all your attention. That's going to take all your passion. It's going to take all your time. So partly, give people an enemy they can fight, but also give them a cause that they can be consumed by. Both sides have a cause, set them apart, set them against each other, let the fur fly, and then that gives us all the space and all the time and all the cover we need to do the real work. When he kind of demurs on this, like I never signed up to be a journalist, and if I was going to be one, I'm going to be an honest journalist. This is how she sort of dismisses him. Very well, all you'll do is help to ruin this country, perhaps the whole human race, besides dishing your own career. You don't want to do this? Fine. All you're going to do is ruin everything, and you're going to sink your own prospects. And whatever kind of a collegial tone or inner circle tone she had taken with him, she kind of dismisses him at that point, and he realizes that he might be cast to the outside. And poor Mark, he is still insecure enough that even the threat of being back on the outside rather than on the inside of the club is enough to get him to backtrack. And, oh, no, I didn't mean blah, blah, blah. I mean, really, I was just trying to. So we'll see. We shall see. There's a vague threat now, even coming from Hardcastle, who had, kind of taken a shine to him for whatever reason. But now we are going to realize that there are, as has been put, wheels within wheels. And as complicated as Mark seems to think things are, every time he goes to a deeper level, assuming that's where the real truth is to be uncovered, he finds 5 more levels of complexity instead. Meeting with Wither. Meeting with Wither and reading through some of that might have hurt your head. That's kind of on purpose. If you've ever met someone who can talk for a long time and you still have no idea what they were talking about, that would be Wither. But with sort of this pompous sense of authority, but always demurring for any kind of specifics. Everything is very vague. Everything is very breezy. There's lots of hand waving, and all of his words, they get longer and longer, but they seem to mean less and less. Mark is maybe starting to worry after that interaction with Hardcastle that maybe the hand that he intends to play on Wither isn't as strong as he thought. Well, as he actually goes into this meeting and he's talking with Wither, you can see Mark try to kind of have a bit of a backbone. Like, I've got this plan and I'm going to stand up to him and I'm going to demand that I know some things. But every time he does that, it's like nailing Jello. And Wither just kind of slithers back around him and finds ways to make it sound like Mark is the unreasonable person for wanting to have some sort of clarity. Mark continues to push, and maybe that is his youthful naivete. He actually starts to get a little bit of information from Wither. There's even a comment about a pay scale Now remember, he doesn't actually say we are going to give you X amount of dollars. It's always these mealy-mouthed, vague, well, someone in your position might expect something along the lines of. But of course, it could be even more if there was a reason for that. We joke in my house sometimes about fixing to get ready to think about something. How many layers of kind of vague, this hasn't actually started, can you add on before it becomes a ridiculous statement? Fixing to get ready to think about something. You're like 4 steps removed from actually doing anything. And so that's kind of this sort of vague nonsense talk that Mark is trying to wade through with Wither. He's kind of getting some answers. He's kind of not getting some answers. And then he's just starting to throw stuff out, Mark is like, well, what about steel? And what about this? And what about that? And it's almost as though he just doesn't know what to do. And he's starting to lose track of this grand speech that maybe he had sort of rehearsed in his own head. And then finally, the director pulls out a contract. Well, if you're insisted upon a contract, it's never been used. There even seems to be something ominous about it. The way that no one else has insisted upon it, it's never been necessary before. But if you're going to press the point and insist upon it, but he's given this form to look at, to think about. But again, there's really no specifics after all this, after this long conversation where there's been so many words spoken, there's still so little that's actually been said. And Wither just kind of breezily dismisses him because the mail has come in. And in that mail, there's a letter to Mark. Mark has a letter this time. And Mark has a letter from Curry, who's basically like, we could call him maybe the dean of the school, the president, whatever. And he's basically saying, well, it's a real shame that you've resigned your position. But maybe you can help us on this date and that date to get your replacement in line. We're kind of thinking about so-and-so from this other place. I ran into him the other day. Since Lord Feverstone let us know, we will certainly miss you, all this kind of stuff. And this has now panicked Mark completely. The wheels within wheels has not only unveiled a new layer of complexity, but it has also cut any kind of safety net from underneath him. When you have 2 jobs that both want you, you can kind of play them against each other. But when both jobs think that you're leaving, you are left with 0 jobs. Even if you were kind of threatening to leave one, whether it was a bluff or whether you were serious, the intention is, well, if you're not going to give me what I want, I will go fully over to the other side. Well, what if both sides say, fine, see you later? This almost sort of feels like the sitcom trope where the guy has a date with 2 girls who don't realize it, and he's running back and forth, to pretending like he's on a date with one, and then he runs off to pretending like he's on a date with the other. And what happens when they figure it out? Well, if you have 2 dates going on at the same time, and they find out you have 2 dates going on at the same time, how many dates are you going to have in a second? 0, because those girls are both going to kick you out. And now the fear grabs him. I can't have no job. I can't threaten to leave nice and go back to the college if I have no job at the college. So now what am I going to do? There are ways in which even sticky situations can be worked out sometimes, maybe with a cooler head, or being patient, or being forthright even, and just speaking frankly and truthfully. But there are times where in the thick of it, we don't see any of that. All we see is the risk and feel the panic. And I think that's where Mark is right now. He feels like he went from having a kind of a bargaining position in the negotiations to now being desperate. And then what would happen? He's already on the hook for various bills that he's incurred. Even just going back to the college would have been a hardship, but what happens if he gets neither? He writes a letter back to Curry, basically saying, oh, that was a misunderstanding on Feverstone's part. I certainly am not giving up my fellowship. I'm not even so sure I'm going to stick with the nice, whatever. Anything that he thought he accomplished in that letter, though, he is still basically terrified. He runs into Stone, the guy who had looked like he was maybe getting chewed out by Wither. Whatever it was uncomfortable. When he first went into the office to talk to Wither, there was that guy Stone, and there was a very clear impression, though nothing was ever said, that that guy was in trouble somehow. And that might have even sunk into Mark, like, oh, it is possible to get in trouble here. Maybe I ought to watch myself. Well, then he sees this guy just kind of looking like odd man out, but in that very special way, almost like he knows how much trouble he's in and how alone that feeling is, because everybody else knows you're in trouble too. And when they know you're in trouble, they're not about to stand too close to you and maybe get stuck as well. This is the kids sitting outside of the principal's office, and they just have that look about them, like the look of doom. And maybe kids don't get very close. They don't even talk to them. They walk on the other side of the hallway, because if you go up to the kid looking like he's doomed in front of the principal's office, at just the moment the principal opens the door, maybe you get pulled in and yelled at too. But Mark is so discombobulated, he's even trying to reach out to this guy. But he finally gets the chance to see Feverstone. He goes and sits with Feverstone. And this is maybe the most miserable conversation to date, where Mark has a conversation with Feverstone as though the two are colleagues. He even says, I thought you were my friend. And it becomes super clear at that moment that Feverstone doesn't care a bit for Mark. Mark is a useful idiot. And he can either get on with the program or he can go jump in a lake. But it doesn't mean anything to him. And Feverstone has hung him out to dry, and he doesn't feel the least bit sorry for it. One by one, these little indications that Mark had that he was in the inner circle, that he was wanted, he was valued, he was an insider, are being broken or cut. From Wither to Hardcastle to the other academics to Feverstone. And one by one, he is being left standing all alone with this great sense of, now what? What kind of mess have I gotten himself into? How in the world do I get out? I have no allies. I certainly have no friends. How much trouble am I really in? And kind of at this lowest point, here's where we shift back to Jane. Jane has bumped into Camilla Denniston. This is the young woman that she first met at St. Anne's, and she realized almost instantly that she liked. So Jane, who was discombobulated too, runs into Camilla. Camilla's there with her husband, who Jane has some kind of vague recollection of being a colleague or a former friend of Mark's. Both Mark and Jane, in their own little parallel stories, could really use a friend. Mark, it's being demonstrated one at a time that the people he was counting on are absolutely and positively not his friends, and he is becoming more and more isolated. Jane could also use a friend because she doesn't know what to do with all this stuff about visions and St. Anne's and, you know, the other side, whatever that means. And people want her to do something for them and being drawn in. And then what's up with Mark? And she is running into people who are overtly looking to be her friend, at least in the Dennistons. And they, even the conversations are so different. And I think that's part of what we're intended to pick up here. When Mark talks with somebody like Feverstone, everything is a little gotcha comment. Everything is one-upmanship. Everything is how superior I am to you, how foolish you are, how it's all like a manipulative political game. When Jane is talking to the Dennistons, even when she feels uncomfortable or like she doesn't really understand what they're getting at, we get these little interactions like about the weather. Everybody begins as a child liking the weather. You learn the art of disliking it as you grow up. Haven't you ever noticed on a snowy day, the grown-ups are all going about in long faces, but look at the children and the dogs, they know what snow is made for. What a wholesome little comment that this young couple, who should be kind of like a parallel to Jane and to Mark, they enjoy being together. They're spending time together. Jane and Mark are having these parallel stories, not even near each other right now. And they're enjoying something as simple and as wholesome as the weather. It's foggy. Isn't this nice? And it's explained in such a way that really kind of underscores the wholesomeness of it. Like childlike wonder, like the good of things that we enjoy because they're enjoyable, that we sort of lose the habit because the older we get, the more we're told what we should enjoy or not enjoy. There's a purity about this that I think, again, we're supposed to see the contrast between the conversations Jane has with the Dennistons and the conversations that Mark has with people like Wither or Feverstone. And I think it's again, I really like to think about the weather. I like weather. You know, being a native Floridian, I really like seasons because I never get them. They're very novel to me. When we moved up to Tennessee for seminary, I loved the fall. I had never actually seen it. It was all very abstract to me. Kind of like in elementary school in December, we would make snowflakes in class, you know, where you take the paper and you fold it into multiple pieces and you cut little pieces out and you unfold it and like, oh, it's a snowflake. And I'm like, okay, I mean, if you say so. I've never seen one. Snowflakes to me, you know, whatever. That could be a made up thing for all I know. And it was so indirect to my own experience. A piece of paper with holes in it, like, yeah, if you say so, whatever. I don't, you know, I believe in snowflakes like I believe in the man on the moon. It just doesn't mean anything to me until moving up to Tennessee and I saw a fall. I saw leaves change. I had never seen leaves change before. We had maple trees in my front yard in Orlando. They changed all right. They went from green to brown to on the ground, just like that. But to be, and Swanee's in the woods, basically on a mountaintop, to see an entire mountain shift from green to yellow to orange to red. People would travel to go watch the leaves change. And over the course, it didn't take very long. I want to say the whole thing was done in a couple of weeks. I'd never seen that before. Walking on some of these gravel roads at night, feeling and hearing the leaves crunch underneath my feet, and a little puff of the vapor from my breath because it was 45 degrees. Like, to me, it was like magic. Because I didn't grow up like that. I never experienced that. I love the snow. I love the snow like only a Floridian can love the snow. Because I've never had to fight with it. I've not had to deal with it when it's dirty, when it turns into solid ice, when it's dangerous, when it's monotonous. We only got snow on the ground 2 or 3 days a year up in Tennessee, so it was always a novelty. But I loved the house we were in was fairly deep in the woods. When the snowfall came, it was, when I say magic, I mean I really mean it. I would step out onto this little stoop, this little porch we had, and as rain falls in the woods, there's almost an audible sound of it's like nothing I'd ever experienced. It was amazing. Now winter I didn't care for in Swanee because it was 3 months of cold, wet, and gray. It wasn't cold enough to be snowy. It was like 45 degrees. 3 months of 45 degrees and no sun messes with your head. And it was wet in the way that stuff just like even your clothes always felt a little damp. And people would get these chest colds because they call it the Swanee crud, because it was just everything was just damp and like nothing ever really dried out. And the lack of the sun. I didn't believe in seasonal affective disorder until I spent 3 months not seeing the sun. And it just makes you feel weird and bad and down. But then spring came. The Florida seasons are hot and wet. That's pretty much it. But as things begin to warm up, daffodils sprouted, wild daffodils everywhere. You would see these green shoots come out of the ground just randomly. And they would get bigger and bigger, and it was fast. Kind of like the leaves changing in the course of a couple of weeks. Those would sprout up over just a couple of weeks, and then those yellow flowers would almost explode one day. And it was amazing to me. Like, this must be the most obvious thing to people who live anywhere north of here. But for me, it was genuinely amazing. So when they are talking about how they love weather, and it's like this childlike love of something, I get it. Because if it's something that's new and it's novel, or it's something that you retain the newness of, even if you've seen it 100 times, if you can actually take in the fact that it is truly miraculous and amazing, you don't lose that childlike wonder, because these things are honestly pretty wonderful. But anyway, all this to say, these are the sorts of people, and Jane even says, whatever happened to Mark's friends like this guy? She even names off these random names that we're not going to know, but it's basically to say, when she and Mark maybe first met or first started dating, he had a circle of friends that seemed smart and good and fun, and we laughed a lot, and we had a good time, and I enjoyed being with them. And now his circle of friends are like these weird academics, and they're creepy, or they're annoying, or they're pompous, or everything's a political game. And the Denistons remind her of a time gone by when things just seemed happier and simpler and better. And so they have this picnic. They start laying out a little bit of what they're talking about, but then ultimately it gets down to, we want you to join us. We want you to meet the head. We now have our first allusions to someone above Miss Ironwood that they are all connected to. And it's not just the Denistons, but also the Dimbles and Miss Ironwood and potentially other people. But there is someone who seems to be in charge. He's not named, but he's referenced. And it's starting to weird Jane out a little bit. It's making her uncomfortable. I don't know this guy. And why would I want to join something for somebody that I don't even know? And it's making her feel really weird. And when she presses for more, they both basically say, there's a lot of this you can't get until you're already in. Which makes her just all the more reluctant to do anything. She is, as we've seen the last couple of chapters, has this kind of reflexive aversion to going into anything too deep. She doesn't want to lose herself. She doesn't want to lose her autonomy. She doesn't want to lose her liberty. She doesn't want to lose herself. Even if it's to the point of rejecting motherhood, because if I do that, I kind of lose me because I take on this new identity of a mother. I take on these new responsibilities of a child. And now I've lost something of me. And so I would rather not even try. So the sort of things the Denistons are talking about start pressing her buttons in all the wrong way. But this is, here's another one of those tricks. She wants to know more. She wants to know exactly what she'd be getting into before she can even think about saying yes. And they're saying there's only so much you can actually know in this kind of situation. You have to take a leap of faith, which is exactly contrary to her normal temperament. He says it's a little bit like getting married or going into the Navy or becoming a monk or trying something new to eat. You can't know until you take the plunge. Trying a new food, that's a simple one, but I think that you can't really know until you try it, right? There's some things we think we're going to like and we don't, and some things we thought, it's disgusting, but then we try it and we realize, man, what have I been missing? I will give you a very simple one. We traveled to the Pacific Northwest when I was a teenager to spend time with some very extended relatives. And these were little towns outside of Seattle in Washington State. And almost everybody had in their backyard growing wild on their fence were raspberries. And I hated raspberries. Raspberry is a disgusting, overly sweet, weird, artificial flavor that nobody ought to like. And I definitely don't like because I had never had one. What I had had was raspberry flavoring, which tastes nothing like a raspberry. I don't know why they even call it raspberry. Those things taste nothing like each other. Like blue raspberry, that's a flavor in like kids' candy and stuff. It tastes nothing like an actual raspberry. That's like saying grape flavoring tastes nothing like a grape. Grape flavored stuff has this very specific artificial kind of flavor to it that doesn't taste anything like a red grape, a white grape, anything. I don't even know where it comes from. But for me, I don't even know why I took the plunge. I cannot remember. I was like 15 years old, so it's just too far back to remember. But I actually ate a wild raspberry for the first time, and I realized I love raspberries. I just don't like raspberry flavoring because they don't taste anything alike. One tastes bad to me, but the real thing is fantastic, and I love it. And I never would have, what would I have missed had I had never actually tried the real thing and assumed that the artificial flavor was all there is? And so as we wind up this section where Jane is kind of feeling like she's at a crossroads, and these people that she really likes and really wants to like even more have put her in a position that presses all of her buttons in the wrong way, but saying how important this is, how critical this is. At the very least, please help us if you can. These visions, if you'll think of them as just getting the news, but if you can let us know, because the other side is going to want to know too. But what they want to do with that news could be very dangerous and very very bad. But she has to be willing to come in, and she has to come in before she can really understand. And that is a leap of faith that seems too far for her right now. But it brings me to a phrase that I want to kind of conclude this on, which is from St. Anselm, Fides Quorens Intellectum. He was, this is a kind of Middle Ages, kind of in the year 1000, roughly, give or take. And St. Anselm writes this as basically one of the scholastics. Fides Quorens Intellectum, faith seeking understanding. And Anselm's argument is our intellectual beliefs will only bring us so close to God before there's no further they can bring us. No matter how hard we think about it, we will only be able to get closer by taking a step in faith. Belief gives us more knowledge, not less. Not only are truth and faith and belief not opposed to each other, sometimes you have to, like Denison says, you have to join before you can understand. And this is even one of Denison's examples. This is one that Anselm uses as well to explain how this relates to faith. You can read every book there is on marriage. You can watch movies about married people, but you will never understand marriage until you're married. Same thing with having children. Same thing with a lot of things in life, maybe some of the most important things in life, where you can only understand them so far from a distance. The information is not the same thing as the thing itself. We can think about liberty or justice or love. You can listen to songs about love, you can read poems about love, but until you experience it, what do you really know about it? Something, but ultimately not enough. Some things, in order to be understood, must be experienced first. And some will argue that we will understand more when we begin to believe. When we trust in God and are willing to step forward in faith, we will actually see more. We will know more. We will understand more. But until we're willing to do that, there's only so much we're going to gather by thinking about God. We must meet him. And when we know him, we will love him. And as we love him, we will only know him more and more. And again, marriage is not a bad metaphor in that same regard. The longer you are married to someone, the more you actually know them. And by knowing someone more, you have the opportunity to love them even deeper. There's that song from the 60s, I love you more today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow. That is kind of a vision of holy matrimony. That we don't get married unless we love someone. But that love is actually deeper somehow later in the marriage than it is at the beginning. Regardless of any one particular marriage and the ways that can go up and down or whatever, but the idea of, Lula and I got married in our early 20s. And I guess everybody thinks that's too young. But as much as we loved each other then, willing to say I do, try to forge a life together, I love her differently now after, nearly 25 years of marriage. Holy cow. Oh, sorry. Almost 30. Yikes. I'm an old man. That love matures. It deepens, it sharpens, it raises in ways that you can't even anticipate as a 20-year-old. Like whatever your capacity was then, it could be filled. Your capacity grows. You know, that's the thing about the story with the you don't, as you have more children, you don't divide your love between them, you multiply. Your capacity only grows, it only deepens. But the plunge has to be taken first. And the only way we will really understand, we will really know, is through faith. Fides quorens intellectum. And that's a pretty tall order that they're asking from Jane, and they understand. Even if you can't say yes, understand that the offer is always open. So we have seen our parallel stories, not too much from Jane, but enough. Enough to know that she is at a crossroads and some big decisions have to be made, some decisions she's actually very personally uncomfortable with. She's going to have to get over herself. Her nature says no, run away. But is our nature always right? Maybe not. But then we compare it to the people and the conversations and the circumstances that Mark finds himself in his half of the story. And I can tell you which one I'd prefer to be right now. So we will continue to get deeper and deeper. It will continue to get faster and faster. It's even going to get crazier and crazier. But the slow burn continues to heat up. And as we move on, these parallel stories are only going to get sharper. Both are at a crossroads. Mark and Jane probably both feel totally alone right now. Mark feels like everyone's out to get him, and he has no idea what to do next. Jane, at least, has people that she wants to be near, wants to love, and feels some kind of connection with, offering her whatever needs to happen. Can she get over herself in order to receive it? Anything else? All right. Well, we will go next time and continue with chapter 6.